You then take the same ticket with you and use it in the parking deck exit to get through the gate with no charge. Thank you to the city staff who have worked to update that system for us. And also, as you may have noticed, the air conditioning is not working in the building today. Staff is actively monitoring the conditions in this room to ensure a safe and healthy environment for all the occupants. If the temperature and other conditions warrant, we will adjourn this meeting early and hold the remaining items at the table. We have 2 items coming out of the committee this morning and 5 other discussion items today. I would ask the commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentations and any public comments so that we can move through the agenda efficiently. Starting off, we start every meeting with the opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not contained on the agenda today? Seeing none. We'll move on to the consent agenda. There is one item listed on the consent agenda today, rezoning case Z6022 at South Boylan Avenue and Hargett Street. The agenda states that the recommended action is to defer discussion to our August Committee of the Whole regular meeting. However, after the agenda was published, the applicant decided to withdraw the rezoning request. The result of the rezoning request is that it will no longer appear on our agenda, so we have no items up for vote on the consent agenda today. Since the Planning Commission never voted on the case, the applicant remains free to refile the application at any time. Moving on to committee reports, there are 2 items on the committee report today, both from the Committee of the Whole. These items are the New Bern area station area planning study and comprehensive plan amendments, and the related rezoning of 744 properties in connection with that study. I understand that we may have a recusal from this case again today.
Yes, for the reasons previously stated at the Committee of the Whole meeting, I would like to have my recusal stand for these 2 items.
Thank you. Without objection, Commissioner Fox continues to be recused from these cases. So with that, I turn it over to our new committee chair, Dean Rains, for a report on those cases.
Thanks, Chair Miller. For both cases, CP 722 and Z 9222, they will be heard on a special meeting scheduled for August 29th at 4 p.m. in the City Council chambers here. Hopefully AC will be on at that time. Both cases have been approved for 120-day extensions by the City Council. So the new deadline for action for CP 722 is November 22nd, and Z9222 is October 23rd. For both cases, the committee asked staff to come back to the August 29th meeting with data regarding various topics, including affordable housing history, historic zones, anti-displacement policies, and racial equity impacts. Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, do we need to make any, are we just noticing this, or do we need to take any action?
Just need to notice.
Okay.
You just need to notice, please.
Okay, so then we have hereby officially noticed that the special meeting for these 2 items related to the New Bern area plan will be scheduled for August 29th at 4 p.m. in these chambers, in this building. And just to double check on timing for those, and quorum for those available, could I get a show of hands about those that are available to attend that meeting at the table on August 29th at 4 p.m.? Okay. I know that staff has already confirmed a quorum. I was just trying to see which of the current members would be able to attend. And of those able to attend, would you be available to stay until 6:30 if the room is available? Yes? Cool, great. Well, assuming that the rest of our required quorum is able to stay until 6:30, that will be the plan. So then moving on. There are 3 items listed under old business today. The first 2 items have previously been discussed, and we have previously received full presentations from staff and the applicant, and we have heard from the public. In both of these cases, the respective applicants have already made 1 round of changes to the conditions, so no additional changes can be made before the commission must vote. The third item listed previously appeared on the Planning Commission agenda. However, there was a procedural issue with the case, so it was never heard. Today's meeting will effectively be the first time that the Commission has heard that case. So the first item in old business is case Z5021, Fairview Road and Bickett Road. This case is to rezone approximately 1.01 acres from industrial mixed use 3 stories to neighborhood mixed use 4 stories, urban limited with conditions. This item was previously heard at our June 27th meeting and was deferred to allow the applicant time to submit a revised request. Since then, the urban limited frontage has been removed and zoning conditions have been revised. The deadline for action is August 26th, and since the applicant has already provided revisions to the conditions, they may not make any additional changes before the Commission. I will ask for a brief staff update from Hannah Reckow to outline revisions to the case.
Good morning, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So as was mentioned, this case has been revised in sort of 2 parts: a removal of the urban limited frontage. So now the requested district is NX4 CU, and revisions to the zoning conditions. And I'll go through those. There was sort of a set of revisions that affected almost nearly every condition. Many of these are changes to the language to improve sort of the clarity and enforceability down the line, and some sort of reorganization. So I haven't marked them all here, but just to highlight some of the more substantive changes. A condition previously regarding screening at the sort of ground level of the parking deck is replaced to indicate separate parking, card reading access for residential uses, and location behind the building for commercial uses. And then in condition 15, it specifies that the parking will be sort of enclosed in a facade, and it clarifies that it will be subject to condition about building materials, condition 4, I believe. I will mention that you have a set of conditions, hard copy. Those have some small changes to condition 15 that were made in response to staff comment, in accordance with the UDO. Those are primarily clarifications and a typographical error, but I did want to point out that there is a small difference there. And then another sort of language change that was discussed last time is the 3 zoning conditions regarding transportation improvements has been clarified that those are to be provided and installed by the applicant. So that's the summary of changes to the case. These changes didn't affect the comprehensive plan consistency analysis or sort of estimated entitlement overall. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Seeing none, we will move on. At our last meeting, we heard full presentations from staff and from the applicant, and we heard from the public. We have also received and thoroughly reviewed all of the over 100 emails and comments provided in this case. However, given the level of public interest and specific request that we received from the opposition for an additional 10 minutes to speak, I'd like to reopen this case for additional public comment. So without objection, I would like to grant 10 minutes, an additional 10 minutes for each side to speak. We will start with the applicant and those in favor. You will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Then we'll provide another 10 minutes to the opposition. Is the applicant available and present today? Thank you. And if anyone would like to speak in favor of this case as well, it will be in a combined allotted time of 10 minutes together with yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Chuck Walker, EPG, 275 North Pea Ridge Road in Pittsboro, North Carolina. Thank you for the additional time that we've had here. From the last meeting, we promised a revised traffic study with revised traffic counts. We have done that, and we have provided it to the transportation staff. I don't see Reinhold here right this second with Ramey Kemp, but what it shows is that there's no appreciable difference in the traffic counts from the original count and this count. One of the other things it shows, it mentions, is that there have been no speed crashes in the past 3 years on Fairview, Bickett, Cherokee, Greenwood, or Hanover. That was one of the questions that the commission asked if there had been any accidents, and there have been none. There not have been. What we also tried to take into consideration is that some of the neighbors were saying that we were assuming everything was going to go down Bickett, and that's when we skewed the numbers, that artificially skewed the numbers. So what we did was we instructed Ramey Kemp to do a 75-25 assumed split between Bickett and Fairview. So now the new traffic study assumes that 25% of the existing would head toward the Fairview access point that's currently there. Even taking that into account, our proposal is still scheduled to reduce, let me say that one more time, reduce the traffic on Bickett. So by a little less than 100 trips a day. So we have updated the traffic counts. We have updated the reports. We are showing more clear. If you look at the screen or at your screens, the upper right-hand graphic shows our intent on how we're going to, what we're going to do in that area as far as road improvements goes. One of which is to straighten out the oblique angle that Greenwood hits Bickett to a more 90-degree intersection. We are also going to, if you've ever been out there, you see on Greenwood, there's basically 3 entrances on Greenwood because it has what almost acts like a highway off-ramp to the right on the Bickett. That's going to be removed, so it will be a straight 4-way intersection if you include the driveway access from the proposed driveway access from the project. We are also going to bring sidewalk and crosswalk improvements to that intersection. And then finally, on the south side of Bickett, we are going to install, we are looking to install some parallel parking spaces that are outside the travel lane. They won't be shutting down the street. They'll be actually pull-over parallel parking spaces. Just to remind you, the access to the parking level on Bickett, for the residents, is on Bickett, and it will be a card read situation, so we can control the number of people that are going into that thing. The traffic for the commercial uses on the back side of the building will be accessed by Fairview. And the other thing that I wanted to point out that was mentioned in the traffic report and reviewed by staff and by Ramey Kemp as far as traffic goes is that currently all the roads in that area are all working under a less than 20% capacity of their roads. So the roads are not being overridden by any such imagination, even now or when the project is approved. One of the other questions that was asked of us, or one of the other concerns, was parks, Roanoke Park. In this last set of review comments, all the departments in the city of Raleigh made a review of the project, including the Parks Department, and the Parks Department showed on page 14 of the review that there is no negative impact to the park from this proposal. The largest change to the conditions that we did was number 15 that Hannah had mentioned to you. We straightened out some of the wording, and we also wanted to make sure that there was two things. One, that there was a commercial presence on Bickett. So that specifically says that there is going to be a commercial presence on the Fairview Road side. It's going to round the corner and stop at the driveway access to the residential. So it goes around the corner, so that's not going to be just a dead corner there. And then we also added that the fenestration of the architecture of the parking level at Beckett will be a combination of masonry and windows, and it'll look like part of the apartment building. So we were very specific about that. And it also references condition number 4, which talks about that the dominant use of the building materials on the public streets will be brick. Now, as you all know, the UDO has its own percentages on transparency at street level. We'll obviously have to adhere to that as well, but we did that in trying to address any concerns that the commission had. Tommy Craven with Priest Craven Associates, our engineer, is here if you have any questions of him about stormwater or anything like that. But if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? We received several emails from those in support, and we have read those, and those are part of the official record as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we have questions, we may call you back up in a moment, but we'll reserve those for table discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have 10 minutes for the opposition, for those opposed to this case to speak. If you are here to speak in opposition of this case, could you raise your hand? I want to make sure that I know we have one. Anyone else? Oh, two. If you could please make sure that, given the 10 minutes, I know that there are some that have organized so that they could have one speaker, but it looks like we have 3 speakers today, maybe 4. Please keep that in mind when providing your comments to allow for other speakers to engage with us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the commission. I spoke at the prior Planning Commission meeting about this matter in opposition. I will not repeat all those statements now. I'll be brief with my time. I'm just going to address only the Ramey Kemp letter dated July 21st, which was the revised traffic analysis. This is not a true traffic impact analysis, which we understood would be the case and which would be performed. Instead, this analysis is, we view this analysis as misleading at best. The conclusions reached are not logical, and there's no reasonable rationale for the assumptions made upon which all of the conclusions in the letter are reached. Taking the 25% and the 75% and basing all of the conclusions of the traffic count on those assumptions does not reach the true impact of what this project will bring by way of traffic to the area. So we urge the Planning Commission to look at the total number of new trips that will be created by the 48 residential units in the commercial spaces in comparison to what's there already. And we believe that the 48 units and the 20,000 square foot of commercial space is just simply too big for the residential neighborhood and the Roanoke Park area. And so we would ask the Planning Commission deny the application based on the overall size of the project and not its appearance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Bob Gilbert. For 2 years, the 155 residents that have participated in trying to communicate with the owners and Chuck have continuously met resistance on the issue of the size of this project, but most importantly on the effect of it to the neighborhood. There are, as of this morning, 155 residents within 3 blocks who are very, very concerned about the safety issues. The neighborhood has never said that we don't want the project. We are just concerned about the size of this project and how it is going to affect traffic. As my associate Matt just explained, there is no logical way that you can add 48 residential units, double the size of the commercial space, and say that there's going to be no effect on traffic in the area. It's literally impossible. I live just above the park, and I can tell you even now, because of all the new things that are happening in the neighborhood since we began negotiations 2 years ago, including the opening of Asia, which has 81 seats and only has 2 parking spaces, though they've managed to do some adjustment to that, and Trophy Brewing, which has 30, there has already been a very, very dramatic effect on all the local streets in terms of traffic, just from dinner traffic from that. We're very, very concerned, and we have tried very, very hard to work with Chuck and the owners to reduce the size of this because of the safety issues. And that's the thing that I will just reiterate again and again. We really, really are concerned about the size of this project, and it affects the safety and the amount of traffic that's going into the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Morning, I'm Josh Hansen. I live at 1509 Cherokee Drive, about 200 feet from the project. In addition to the items already brought up, I'd like to point out 2 other items that are in the application. I believe it's items 17 and 18 concerning access to the planned future BRT North, I think those statements in the application are at best hopeful, because BRT North, as you all may know, is only in the planning stage, has not been funded. The actual location of the BRT has not been set, and certainly the stations have not been set. I correspond with Het Patel with the City of Raleigh, who's in charge of BRT. There is no plan. There is no plan for stations, and the application states that there is sidewalk connection to the planned station. So again, no station, and there is certainly no sidewalk connection, because coming from this site, you have to cross the Norfolk Southern Railroad, or is that CSX on our side? Norfolk Southern. It's the railroad tracks. The sidewalk ends. On the north side, this is the Fairview Avenue flyover of Capitol. There is a 30-foot drop down to Capitol. There is no place to put a sidewalk that will connect this site to the BRT. None. On the south side, there is a sidewalk on the residential portion that stops at the train tracks and resumes only for the catering facility on the corner, and that's it. It does not and cannot extend to Capitol Boulevard. There is no pedestrian access to Capitol, and the BRT is not even approved, planned, and no stations. The other thing I would like to point out is that our neighborhood, all of our residences, which many of us have invested in heavily in the past 20-plus years, is an NCOD. We all have very tight restrictions on what we're able to do there. Maximum sizes being a key issue, accessory buildings being a key issue. We can't do that. This project is on the edge of the NCOD, not included in the NCOD, admittedly, but on the edge. And to allow this project to go well over size, the purpose of their application, is not fair to the property owners. We have a 2-height restriction. They have a 3-height restriction. That should be plenty to improve this property, be very profitable for the applicant. Going to that 4 stories is not a smooth transition, regardless of the fact that it may only appear to be 3 on one side and will be 4 on the other. It's still 4 stories. They don't need the 4th story. Eliminating the 4th story would reduce that residential component, reduce the traffic on Bickett. So I'm urging you to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Then with that, we will bring this item back to the table for additional questions and comments from the commissioners. I would like to start us off at our last meeting with a question for staff. At our last meeting, we asked for staff to review the traffic study provided by the applicant so that we would be prepared to discuss it today. And I was going to see if staff is available to discuss that traffic study and evaluate its findings for us.
Good morning. I'm Monique Guyant with Transportation. So last time that we all met, you requested us to study, or staff to study or review the traffic study. So what was submitted from Ramey Kemp was a traffic study letter that compared the existing conditions, the traffic conditions, to the proposed development that aligns with the limits in residential and retail development for this site. We have reviewed and we have agreed with the overall analysis with the letter stating that the existing neighborhood roads would not be over capacity with the development. And I'm pulling up my memo to be concise. And we do believe that the recommendations stated in the letter, such as specifically the realignment of Greenwood with Bickett, the construction of the crosswalk, in addition with having on-street parking on Bickett, would be supportive of increasing safety within the area and providing pedestrian connectivity. We did note that the condition stating to have a painted bike lane on Fairview does not fully align with our UDO standards. And additionally, we did some additional work, connecting with staff, because there was some notes about signs and markings around Roanoke Park. So staff did note some opportunities to address those concerns. Concerns such as doing a sign audit to make note of any missing or damaged signs, and then also looking to see if there's an opportunity to add additional signs to ease some concerns such as people driving the wrong way on the street. And I believe that's the best summary of the traffic study that was submitted.
Thank you. And specifically with respect to the traffic counts, and could you provide some information about why the traffic study analysis says that this will not generate additional new traffic in the area?
Yes, so the reason that this would not add to additional traffic in the area is because there's existing uses on the site currently. So the traffic letter compares the existing use, the traffic that's generated from the retail that's there now, and then taking the proposed conditions. So taking the 48 dwelling units and the 20,000 square feet of retail, the overall net difference is lower than what's existing today.
Thank you. And staff has reviewed and confirms those findings.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. That's helpful. Then bring it back to the table for other questions and comments from the commissioners.
If you don't mind.
Commissioner Otwell.
Chair Miller, thank you. I have a follow-up question, please. Could you explain the difference between the letter provided by the traffic engineers and a true traffic impact analysis? What's different in the process?
Yes, so this traffic letter, typically with the process that we follow for rezonings, if a rezoning comes in with their current zoning and then their zoning that they're seeking, their proposed zoning, we will compare the trips and traffics generated between that. For this site, there was an overall difference between their existing zoning and the zoning that they were seeking. So they did not trigger a TIA to be completed at rezoning for this site. So this traffic study that was submitted to us was not following our standard procedure. It was not scoped with us. And so typically there would be some kind of simulation run comparing the existing traffic, the additional proposed traffic, and then some kind of simulation that will give us some kind of level of service that is available at the intersections. We do not have that information because the traffic letter submitted was just comparing the existing traffic counts to what we can imagine the additional traffic generated would be. It's really just traffic counts versus an analysis and simulation of traffic within the area.
Thank you. Can I restate that to make sure that I understand it, and you can check me? So what they did was they took the tables that reference what kind of trips would be generated by a particular type of development and based an estimate on that compared to rigorous traffic impact analysis would include modeling and simulation of the actual conditions on the ground and how the roads interact.
That is correct.
And I'd like to point out for my fellow commissioners and for the folks in the audience that there was a level of service that was determined by these estimates, and level of service, if I'm not mistaken, is completely about congestion for automobiles. And it measures how long they're going to get stuck in intersections and stuck in traffic. It does nothing to say whether this is a road that somebody would want to walk across or have a park on. So I accept the traffic analysis that's been done by the applicant, but I don't think the level of service is a really good measure of whether this is appropriate for a neighborhood or not. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions and comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Otwell.
All right. I think I can disappoint everybody here at this meeting. So this is another question for transportation. I'll call you back up here. You're going to get your steps in today. I'm sorry. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about the parking situation. So I understand parking is kind of rough. I think that there's a remedy for the neighborhood to apply for residential parking permits. And so as you come up, the question would be, what is the process for that? What are the thresholds the neighbor would have to meet? And what would be the likely extents of such a district?
Sure. So, good morning, Commissioner. My name is Matthew Courier, and I'm the parking manager for the city. Residential permit zones are available in the city. We have 13 at the moment, and they are all started at the neighborhood level and then approved by council. So the way that process usually works is that neighborhood residents reach out to my staff, describe some concerns about congestion in a neighborhood, over parking in a neighborhood. Typically, we see this around schools. So imagine Broughton High is a good example. So urban high school with a lot of young drivers trying to find parking. There's not enough on campus, and they go to a neighborhood and they park there all day, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Well, the neighborhood reaches out and says, well, I can't park all day in front of my house. So we work with them to put a petition together. So the petition does a few things. It describes the concern, and it describes the restrictions that they would like to put in place. So what we typically create is a two-hour time restriction for non-permitted parkers within a specific geographic area. And then if the concern goes beyond that, we can do a full no parking restriction for non-permitted parkers for up to 8 hours a day. So how that works in an example is the neighborhood just north of Glenwood South has no restriction during the day because there's not a lot of pressure during the day, but they could have a 2-hour time restriction during the day for 8 hours or so, 8 a.m. to, let's say, 5 p.m. And then they can take a break from 5 p.m. to, let's say, 11 p.m. And then they can do a full no parking restriction for non-permit holders from 11 p.m. to, let's say, 7 a.m. Now, case law says that we cannot have it be permit holders only for more than 8 hours a day, and council has only ever approved those overnight. So in an area over here, what we would probably be looking at is a chunk during the day with some level of shared parking, where it is 2-hour time regulated for non-residents, and then unlimited parking for residents. So they need 70% approval for 8 contiguous block faces. So a block face means is each street has 2 block faces. So they would have to have 8 touching areas. So we create a certain size so that we don't have, 4 different residential permit zones right next to each other with different rules. So they have to be of a certain size within our policy. And again, 70% approval on each of those blocks.
And how long does that process normally take once initiated by the residents?
So it depends.
Maybe we could have a range.
Yeah, so it really depends on the residents' work. So this is truly a grassroots resident process. So we give them the tools, we walk them through the tools. It's up to them to gather signatures. And we can't move forward, and we don't bring items forward for approval to council unless they're going to meet that threshold, or unless they're very close and we think council may approve an exception to the policy. They can move as quickly as probably, I would say, 3 months. We've had others that have lingered for 18 months because they really struggle to get the signatures they need to move quickly. And they do take council approval. So that's the last stage of that process is council's approval, and then our installation of signage in the neighborhood, and then notification to everybody in the neighborhood that they need to get their residential permit pass, because we don't want to start issuing citations to folks in the neighborhood who may be able to park on the street.
Is there a charge for those passes?
There is. It's $20 a year per pass, per vehicle.
Okay. And so it would be my understanding that rules such as these would generally preclude any future apartment residents from storing their cars or automobiles permanently on the street because they would have to move it in that 2-hour period and they potentially not be able to park it during that 8-hour period. Apartment residents are not eligible for those residential passes?
So at the moment, the only eligible property types to get a residential permit pass are detached single-family homes, attached single-family homes or duplexes, and townhomes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Incredibly helpful. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question about the time limit
Sure.
that you were mentioning. You said that's max 8 hours per day restricted out of a 24-hour period.
So let me clarify. So we can we can only restrict it to residents only for up to 8 hours a day. So typically what we will build, working with the neighborhood, let me say it differently. We try and be as specific about the problem as possible, right? So public streets are public streets and they should be accessed by the public, right? So we try and narrow down the scope of the restriction to make sure there's as much access as possible. So for example, and if it's a school that's the issue, we're gonna narrow it down so we have the school not have access, or all day parking, bringing up. It's all about supply at the street level, right? It's not about keeping people off the streets. It's saying, hey, there's too many people parking, and the folks who live closest to it can't access the curb because there's too many people. So we're trying to build the regulations in a way that that gives access to the folks most adjacent to it at those most critical times. So what we would build in this example perhaps is a daytime restriction or maybe an after 5 restriction. So we have that over on North Person Street near the business district where like Jolie and the pizza shop over there, Oakwood Pizza Box, is. There's a restriction where it's wide open during the day, and then from 5 to 11 p.m. at night, there's a restriction for residents only, but no 2-hour restrictions out. So again, we try and be as narrow as possible to manage that supply at the curb.
Okay. And 2 quick follow-ups to that. You said 8 contiguous blocks max. Is that a max set by law?
No, that's a minimum.
Oh, it's a
so
minimum.
yeah, that's the minimum. Okay. So it has to be 8 contiguous block faces.
Got it.
So each street counts as 2, and then we cut the blocks by an intersection.
Got it.
So a good example of that, however, is along the park in this area. We do have no parking along the park, so we could only count 1 block face on each of those roads.
Okay. And then my last question, I'm sorry if I missed this, but is there a set permit price per year for residents to apply to that? Like, what is the cost for the permit?
So it's $20 per permit per year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And for this rezoning case, is there anything that the applicant can do with respect to this rezoning case to impact that residential parking permit program?
That program is built by council and their policies. So typically, there's nothing that they can do at the applicant side to affect those. It would really take council to the applicant side to affect those. It would really take council to affect any change associated with it.
Thank you. And also those permits and petitions, do those come through the Planning Commission, or do they go directly to council?
Directly through staff and directly through council for approval.
Thank you. I think I've spoken with several commissioners. Everyone feels strongly they agree with the residents that parking might be an issue in this area and that the residential parking permit program might be a good solution, but it's not something that this commission or the applicant can affect with respect to this case or otherwise. But that's incredibly helpful, and I'm very glad that you shared that with us. It's good I knew about it, but not in that much detail, and with the rest of the neighborhood. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Can I ask you one
Yes, Commissioner
one
Bueller.
quick thing I forgot? Did you say that apartments are not, if this was built and these were apartments, I guess for rent or for purchase, those people would not be eligible to apply?
That is correct. Yeah, at the moment, council has only allowed, and we use the UDO to define this, but detached single-family homes, attached homes, which are just duplexes, and townhomes, which are vertically separated.
Interesting. Okay.
Council has asked staff to come back in the fall to address potential changes with that, but at the moment, those are the only approved property types.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Other questions and comments from the commissioners?
I'm sorry to keep dragging this out, but I think that the amount of attention that this case has gotten requires due diligence. I have another question for transportation regarding the bike lane. Would the painting of that little teeny strip of bike lane that's in the conditions preclude the requirements for street improvements when the time comes? Are they going to be exempt from that?
Good morning, Monique Guy with Transportation again. From my understanding, with the zoning condition to have a painted bike lane along the frontage of Fairview, it would limit the street improvements that would be able to be in place that would typically be required by our UDO at time of site plan. Specifically, the designation as a 2-lane undivided avenue of Fairview includes a separated bike lane, but to have a zoning condition of a painted bike lane, that is a requirement that they need to fill. So it conflicts.
And then there would be no, because it might be a situation where they would produce a fee in lieu for that street improvement as well if it didn't meet certain conditions about the percent of the block face or connectivity.
That could be a possibility at site plan. Yes.
Okay. I believe that our applicant wants to address that as well. I'd like to hear what he says.
The idea from the painted bike lane actually came from staff, from Bradley. The reason why he had suggested that was because that area of Fairview Road is in a transition phase, and everyone knows it's going to get improved someday. So when the full improvement comes, the bike lane, the standard bike lane would be built. So this is he was considering this a stopgap measure because we're doing a bike share facility within the project. So that's why it's written that way. It's seemed as a completely temporary access and connection from the sidewalk in the street to the bike share, which is in the building. That's why he had suggested it.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have a question for planning as well. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the frontage and making sure that this development addresses the community appropriately. And with the removal of the urban limited frontage, I think it's now condition 15, which kind of does all the work of replacing that. And it says that commercial uses will have pedestrian access around the frontage and around the corner and stop at the residential driveway. And I think I'm okay with the idea of what they're trying to say. But I am concerned that with the removal of the specific language that's in the urban limited frontage, that these conditions might not be specific enough to address things. I'm concerned about parking between the street and the building face. And I'm concerned about primary entrances for residences and the buildings along each street face. And I would like your opinion on how well these conditions mimic the urban limit frontages requirements aside from the parking garage. Like, I don't like that parking garage there, but I think that's a compromise that I can live with. It's the rest of the requirements that give me a little bit of heartburn.
So there are a few parts to what a urban limited frontage does. The prohibition of parking between the building and the street, which these zoning conditions don't explicitly require or enforce. Certain requirements for pedestrian access and pedestrian facing street. And then build to and sort of the relationship of the building to the street, how much of that frontage it fills up. And then the requirement for active uses to wrap a parking deck. And so as you may remember, I believe that was one of the reasons they wanted to remove that frontage, because they want the ability to have the parking be right up along the street, not have some sort of retail or commercial use in front. So you asked for an opinion about kind of how they compare. I think I see the pedestrian access component here, and then there's conditions regarding sort of the appearance of the parking deck section of the building, but specifically, I don't see many of those other elements necessarily in these zoning conditions.
Thank you. Thank you. That was my interpretation as well.
Thank you.
So
Comments?
In general, I like the idea of this project, and I would like to see something mixed use. I think this is a really great intensity for this emerging corridor. I would not like to see this site get developed under current entitlement And I think that the denial of this rezoning could end up being a lot worse for the neighborhood if some undesirable uses are brought in, like warehouses and automotive repair and breweries could be open here. So I would like to vote for this, but I'm really concerned about the provision for the bike lane that reduces the applicant's obligations with respect to alternate mobility and the urban limited frontages. Some of the protections besides the parking garage, which I think I can live with. Some of the other protections I think are important and they're not present. And I think when the time comes and the discussion is over, I'm going to vote against this with a recommendation that they update these conditions to be more specific by the time it gets to council and hopefully get it through council. But I don't think I can vote for this in its current state.
Thank you. So that we could leave a clear trail for council, could you clarify what specific urban limited frontage protections you would like to see added?
I'd like to see parking prohibited between the street and the building, and I'd like to see a specific built-to requirement included, along with primary pedestrian entrances along both faces.
Okay. And with respect to the bike lane?
Oh, sorry, I forgot about the bike lane. If there's some sort of clarification that this is a temporary measure and that the applicant intends to fully comply with the streetscape obligations at the time of site development.
Thank you. So those 4 items, it might be helpful for council if you were to list all of those out when you make your motion to follow those. Any other questions, comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Fox.
I'm actually ready to approve it and I was going to have a similar recommendation. I was going to go the other route, make a recommendation to approve and then recommend council add or address these 4 issues that you've just outlined.
Thank you. I'm personally inclined to go that same way too, but we can have a split vote and that makes sense too. Commissioner O'Haver?
Yeah, can I, excuse me, can I ask the applicant what the holdup is on the urban frontage? Because I agree with Commissioner Otwell and Commissioner Fox. That was one of my concerns in the last meeting, so I do appreciate an attempt to activate that part of Bickett, but I do understand that sometimes those urban frontages, when you get these, lack of a technical term, funky sites, make it challenging to meet all of the frontage requirements. So I'd like to understand from the applicant why the attempt to mimic is in the conditions versus putting the frontage on the parcel.
We were told by staff after some further review that if we left the UL designation on the project, then that would expect that the commercial uses on Bickett will extend the entire frontage of Bickett. We could not do that because that would not only increase the square footage of the commercial onto Bickett, it would also take away 25% of the parking out of the parking deck because you have to make room for the storefront. And so where the parking is now, the parking lot will get cut in half on one side. Given what was being told to us by the neighborhood about having, the project being too big, they were worried about traffic. We thought, okay, that's not an issue. So what we did, or what we thought we did, was we had through the revision of conditions, kind of backed into it. We talk about outdoor tables on both gathering spots on both streets. We talked about bringing the commercial all around the corner to the parking drive. We talked about all that kind of stuff. Then as far as no parking between the building and the street, there's a condition in there in part of our improvements when we talk about Bickett, we talk about installing parallel parking spaces on the south side of Bickett. So that would preclude any parking between the street and the building. There's not space for it. So that's why we felt like we got into the spirit of what the UL designation was trying to do. We thought the improved constructions on Bickett, especially the south side of Bickett, would preclude any kind of parking consideration between the street and the building. That's what we thought we had accomplished.
So I agree that you got with the spirit, and I think it's just the details that need to be worked out that I think are important.
Okay. Thank you.
So does that mean that the applicant would be comfortable or would be willing to add a prohibition on parking between the street and the building?
Absolutely.
What about adding specific build-to requirements?
We could do that. And as far as the pedestrian access for Bickett to the residential, please remember that the residential doesn't start till the second floor. So at best, if we were to put and I'm not saying we're against this, at best to do a pedestrian access from Bickett would be to a common staircase to go upstairs at best. There are no units on the street level, so that's why we were not concerned about having direct access for the residential portion of the project.
Do you have concerns about that
I
remaining?
still think that a stairway access for residents to go right to the park is pretty important.
I'm not saying we're absolutely willing to do that. I just wanted to make sure that I'd say we do something and the commission felt like we're going to run doorsteps off of Bickett all the way down the road, and we're not doing that. So a common stair or a common access point to the residential, fine, absolutely.
Thank you. And then the final item is with respect to the street plan and intending to comply with the street plan in addition to having the bike lane. Is that something that you would be willing to include as well?
That's, again, the painted crosswalk on condition on the cases, it came from staff, so that's why we did it.
Okay.
But and also please remember the commission that this site plan has to come back through the process as well. So any other fine tuning will be taken care of at that point. But if there's wording that we're missing that you think needs to get added to a treatment to Fairview, we are open to do that, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, in that case, if you're willing to make those changes at the council level, if council should wish to see that as well, then I'm still comfortable voting with Commissioner Fox to approve this case with those recommendations.
So, yeah, just, and I see Commissioner Fox working on her recommendation. I heard two different things. I heard that Bradley had said that it doesn't limit their obligation, but then I heard here in the meeting that it would limit their obligation on the bike lane. So I just think we need to have some clarification prior to them going to council to make sure we understand. Because unless I'm wrong, I heard two different things today. So
this is not one of those items in the UDO that you can, by zoning condition, lessen your obligation. Okay, block perimeter, things of that nature, which are specifically spelled out in the UDO, you can by zoning condition alter the minimum requirements under the code. This would not be one of those items. And so if this came in if something came in as a tier 1, okay, site plan, that doesn't require transportation improvements, but they would, based on this zoning condition, have to at least stripe a bike lane. If they came in with a higher tier, a tier 3 or whatever that required them to make the improvements along the road, that very likely would be required by staff to make the more permanent improvement for a bike lane. I think that's why in the letter or in the staff memo on the transportation report, it's recommended that the applicant and staff work together to make sure that the appropriate bike lane improvement is put in dependent upon the site plan.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Haver. With that clarification, I'm happy to let that condition stand as it is.
Okay. Other questions, comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Yes, Commissioner Fox.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of Z5021 as it is reasonable and in the public interest. And I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated August 8th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement. Furthermore, I would like council to address some of the concerns the commission has regarding the lack of an urban limited frontage, specifically limiting parking between the street and the building, providing a build to, and articulating primary pedestrian entrances.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fox has made a motion. No, Commissioner Haber has seconded. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Then in that case, all those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously 7-0. Moving to the next item, case Z423 on the east side of Creedmoor Road. This case is to change approximately 1.65 acres from R4 to office mixed use, 3 stories. This case was first discussed and deferred on May 23rd, and since then, a new parcel at 5300 Creedmoor Road was added to the rezoning request, and the petition was changed from a general use case to a conditional use request. At the time the agenda was published, staff had received draft revised conditions that addressed concerns raised by the Planning Commission at our last meeting. Could staff advise as to whether those signatures have been received since the agenda was published?
Good morning, Alicia Thomas.
Yes.
Yes.
Those have been, okay. And are those incorporated in the agenda materials in the staff report?
Yes. So,
Okay.
and I can provide clarity. What was submitted as a draft was published. What was signed has been published on Friday.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Then in that case, there's been one round of conditions, of changes to the conditions that have already been made by the applicant, so no additional changes may be made in front of the Planning Commission. The deadline for action on this item is August 12th, which means that we must either act on this case today or request additional time from council. So with that, I will ask for a brief staff update from Alicia Thomas to review revisions to this case.
So, good morning again. The most recent update is that a third parcel has been added, that is 5300 Creedmoor Road, thereby making the total site 1.65 acres. Again, just to get you aligned, since it's been a couple of months, this site is along Creedmoor Road, near the intersection of Millbrook and Creedmoor. The third parcel that was added, again, was 5300 Creedmoor Road. It's at the bottom left of the screen, showing a street view of the site, being a corner lot. And as well as the third parcel being added, one condition was also added to the case, and this condition was related to noise of construction, basically limiting the hours of construction between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., as well as limiting construction or prohibiting it on Sundays and various holidays. The increase or the addition of a third parcel increased the entitlement, increasing the max number of units to 83 units, and then increasing the office square footage to roughly 59,000 square feet, and the retail square footage remained the same. Again, this request is consistent with various policies, including future land use map, density transitions, and other policies listed here on the screen. And there were no inconsistent policies identified with the report. And I just wanted to add that the drafted language that was provided, there was a change made. However, the published, the signed language that was received on Friday is correct and accurate. And again, your deadline for action is August 12th.
Thank you. Hold up my notes back up for just a moment. We have already received a full presentation from the applicant and from staff. We have not? My mistake. We have not received a full presentation. I was wondering, I was pulling back through my notes from May. So with that.
That's the one that you had to have a neighborhood meeting?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's the next one. Yes.
The next one.
So we have received a full presentation previously. Okay. from the applicant and from staff, and we have also heard from the public. But by show of hands, are there members of the public who are here today who would like to speak on this case? I see one. Any others? In that case, without objection, I would like to reopen this case for an additional 4 minutes of time to speak on each side. The applicant and those in favor will have 4 minutes, and those in opposition will also have 4 minutes. We'll start with the applicant and those in favor.
Good morning. My name is Derek Baker. I am the applicant of this site. We essentially are proposing to build a office building on the site for our own company use. And then what we'll likely do is have a building kind of on each site, kind of side by side. Approximately 2 stories, what we're planning right now. Upper level we're going to occupy, and the lower level hopefully rent out for medical space or something like that. It's consistent, right, with all the land planning. We've tried to also accommodate, we've had very little resistance from neighbors. The one issue that did come up was construction noise, because this is going to be a 3-phase thing that could go on for some time. So we built that into the condition. We're still working with one of the residents on a separate agreement. It's actually the owner of that corner parcel also has a property abutting the development, and so that's the vegetated buffer to put up some additional screening. But we're still addressing that, and we'll handle that as kind of a covenant separate from the zoning condition. So, pretty straightforward project. Any questions?
Thank you. If we have any during our table discussion, we can call you back up as well. Any other comments for those in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll move on to the opposition. Those opposed to this case have a total of 4 minutes to speak.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Schoonover. I live to the east side of this property, the back of it. I think last time we were here, they talked about a traffic study. No one's brought that up. They were going to do a traffic study about the pass-through where they cut through the traffic from the Harris Teeter. I've heard no mention of that today. The biggest thing, or one of the biggest things, is this 5300 block has not been properly vetted. The city, or the meetings I have for the city or for the neighborhood does not show 5300 on it at all. They have slipped in this 5300 block addition to this without being vetted through the neighborhood and giving them a chance to vote on it or have a say-so about it. Also, I want to encourage you to deny this. I'm concerned about the noise. I've lived there for 31 years. I paid over $140,000 in property taxes to live there. The city has cut 20 feet off the back of me for a right-of-way in the past. Now they're trying to add these high-rise commercial buildings in the back. The first thing the applicant did when he bought the 5306 block was cut down every tree on the lot except for 2 or 3 that was on the property line. The property at 5300 is heavily wooded, and I'm sure that's his method would be to cut down every tree there, which only increases more noise coming into the back of my property. Once again, there's been nothing done and said about the safety of the traffic. Within 300 feet, there are 500 apartments being built. And that's 700 to 800 cars in the morning, 700 to 800 cars in the afternoon that's going to come through that. And that intersection at Creedmoor Road and Millbrook is a F- 10 years ago. There's 3 other set of apartments with over 500 units being built within walking distance. There's been no consideration about the traffic that comes through there. Most importantly is the pass-through that would be done through the back of it that would cut through to Millbrook in front of Harris Teeter Shopping Center. And that's basically all I've got to say. I encourage you to deny this. The applicant has shown up with a hand-drawn application or hand-drawn sketch with no specifics to what he's asking for, other than just to rezone it and give him a free reign to do what he wants to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public in opposition to this case? Seeing none, we will bring this item back to the table for questions and comments from the commissioners. Excuse me. Start us off. Commissioner Peeler.
Oh, can I ask your name one more time? Gary. Can you let us know exactly, because I want to understand this better, where you said 300 more apartments are being built to someone within walking distance. I'm just looking at my map and I want to understand where that is.
It's like the 4800 block of Creedmoor Road.
4800.
It's already been rezoned and approved.
Okay.
There's 500 more being built right there at Lead Mine and, well.
So like
close to
at
the
Sugar
Marriott.
Bush Road, Benson Memorial, right
Yep.
there? Okay.
And there's another 500 being built on Lead Mine and North Hills, north of it just a little bit. There's another 500 being built on the corner of North Hills and Millbrook by Shelley Lake. All that's been approved already.
Mm-hmm.
And that intersection there's been 2 fatalities on Millbrook and Town and Country. There's been 1 fatality on Creedmoor and Sherborne.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not making this up. I mean, it's
No, yeah. I mean, I think when you came to committee of the whole, if I recall.
I did.
And I said this then, but I drive this corridor quite a bit for my job, and
at your own risk.
it is a very dangerous place to drive. That intersection is. I think I would also like to see, what that what the development plan could look like in there with better frontage. Because I mean, if you've driven that part of Creedmoor Road, like it is probably the most unwalkable, unbikeable, public transit friendly corridor probably in Raleigh, that close in. Yeah, I don't know. And I'm looking at the plan too, and I don't see anything about frontage. I don't know if any other commissioners share any concerns with that, but the traffic is one thing, the frontage is another thing. And yeah, I would just like to know more what the plan would look like, honestly.
And I thought we had a traffic study coming from the last time we were here in addressing the bike path in the front and the bus stop.
Thank you. Could we have transportation staff or planning staff, if you've reviewed this, talk about the traffic conditions in the area and the impact of this project on the existing conditions, and what traffic and studies have been conducted on this case?
Good morning. Monique Guyant with Transportation. To comment on the existing traffic conditions and the development that's taking place, currently there is an approved development plan for a multifamily apartment complex. You guys were talking about it a little bit earlier. It's south of Z423, and there are plans for 300 multifamily units, and there's a number of recommended improvements for that. At the moment, I don't have access to that, but if you would like, I can come back with the specific improvements that came out of the traffic impact analysis that was done for the 300 multifamily unit apartment complex. Zoning out of just the area off of Creedmoor Road, looking more, I guess, east to Leadman Road, there are a number of developments taking place. I don't have access to which ones were approved, whether it's a site plan approval or a rezoning. Typically, when we take into account the traffic that is coming and influencing the future conditions, we like to see approved developments versus rezonings that take into account. As to whether there was a traffic study completed for this case, I'm not aware that there was intentions to complete a traffic study, but I can say that based off of the increase for the zoning that they're seeking, that a traffic impact analysis was not triggered for the site. And that is in addition to the added parcel.
Thank you. And could you help explain at what point would a traffic study be triggered for cases like this, and how this case compares to that threshold?
Okay, so typically for a rezoning process, if the proposed zoning adds an additional 150 peak hour trips. I say 150 specifically because Creedmoor Road is a multi-lane avenue. That would trigger a TIA, and that's just our high-level review process, but there are additional triggers, like such as you guys can require a traffic impact analysis is done for this case.
Sure, and in this case, just to review, perhaps it might be unfair to ask off the top of your head, do you remember what the proposed project would add in terms of peak hour trips?
I can pull that up.
I can answer that. I was anticipating that. It's 43 new trips in the morning and 46 in the afternoon peak.
I see. So it's not approaching, it's less than a third of what would be required.
That's
for
correct.
A traffic impact analysis to be triggered in this case. Thank you. I think the applicant might wish to respond and provide additional information about that as well.
Yeah, and we did, in the process of this, speak with staff from the the traffic department, and a couple of things that were raised, which he felt was the zoning was too early in the process, that when we went into the site plan, we don't have a full site plan yet. We're still working with our landscape architect to figure out the property. We haven't even acquired 5,300 yet, so 5,300 application is coming from the current owner of the property. We have a purchase agreement, but it's contingent on the zoning, so a lot of that is still pending, right? So we haven't, a lot of that work will be pending once we know that the zoning is approved before we come back. But in our advanced conversations with the traffic department, one of the things that he recommended that we're very much in favor of to allay Mr. Schoonover's concerns about, he's talking about the cut-through traffic more than the traffic on Creedmoor, is simply speed bumps. And, you know, adding speed bumps along that way to just keep people from using that as a cut-through. We have no issues with that. We prefer that because that adds safety to our employees. We will have employees on that site. This is not strictly an investment property. This is for our employees, our company. And the second thing that he indicated to me was that staff have been pushing for some time for a traffic signal on that corner of Sherborne and Creedmoor because it is a, you know, as Mr. Schoonover said, it is a corner that is a lot of risk, and but they haven't received approval for that yet. But with the addition of the apartments, and he said, you know, that they're going to continue to push for that at this stage of the game, but that's obviously outside of our control. And then the third point is the walkway in the front. The issue that we have to deal with on this property is there's a steep slope right on the front end of the property. So the current sidewalk is basically pushed in between that slope easement, and then the property line starts after the slope. So there's, you know, even though there's space there, because of the slope of the property, we have to carve probably 10 feet off of the front of the property down, which just isn't feasible in order to increase that space between where Creedmoor is right now.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Rains? Vice Chair Rains?
Question for maybe the staff and applicant on the connection issues with the adjacent Sherborne Road, and it looks like there's a stub on the adjacent parking lot on the adjacent property. Do you intend on connecting your parking?
We intend to connect with Sherborne Road, which is the primary reason that we've bought the corner properties, just from strictly a safety standpoint, so that allows us, if anybody right now wants to go south on Creedmoor out of the property, if we can't access Sherborne, they have to turn right and then make a U-turn, and you know, a lot of accidents had happened there. By us being able to access Sherborne, you can make a left-hand turn at the four-way intersection, and ideally a stoplight intersection, but at this point there's no stoplight there. But the other access to the stub, we are somewhat agnostic on. I spoke to the manager of, actually my contractor spoke to the manager of the Contractors Association, which is in that property, and they informed us that the city required them to put that stub there when they developed that property to deal with some of the traffic issues on Creedmoor, to have interconnections between anticipated future development on these three properties. And so my expectation is we will be required to connect to that stub because the city required that stub to be put in the first place.
Follow-up question on that. I know you're not in site plan yet, but do you think you will be required to have another access point off directly to Creedmoor from your properties?
I would like that. I'm not sure if that would be approved, but if we only had access on Sherborne, we can still do the project, but we would like to have, because these will be 3 contiguous buildings, we would like to keep one of the 2 driveways now that are on Creedmoor. If once we submit the site plan, if that's approved, but that's still a little up in the air.
Sure. Final question. I read through the condition about the vegetative buffer on adjacent properties, but I wasn't clear on the specifics in terms of frequency of plantings, the depth of that buffer area. Can you elaborate on that?
So the owner of the Sherborne properties, there's 2 properties that abut these 3 properties, and about I believe about 80% of that property is one property, and about 20% of it is Mr. Schoonover's property. The owner of that has the 80% kind of contiguous land owns the corner of 5300, so she's selling us that corner. And part of the condition is they would like us to install a tall privacy hedge there, in conjunction with the required kind of buffer yard, the protective yard between the zoning, mixed use and residential. So we're still figuring out the specifics of that. We have an agreement to install that, but in terms of exactly where to put it, we decided to take it out of the zoning condition, and we're going to put it into a covenant in terms of a deed restriction covenant, privately, rather than trying to put it into the zoning restriction, because we haven't figured out all the implications of how that affects the site, where to put it. As Mr. Schoonover said, there is a 20-foot sewer easement on the back of that property presently, and so we're dealing with the sewer easement and then the protective yard requirements and the buffer zones, and then where to fit that hedge. It's still in consultation with our landscape architect. So in terms of getting something to this meeting, we decided to pull it out of the zoning condition and negotiate it as a separate item, as a deed restriction for between the seller and the buyer. Does that make sense?
It does. So there still would be a buffer required because of the use adjacent
as
to
per the
residential.
UDO, right? The requirements.
This will
of
just
that.
be an enhanced.
This would be in addition to it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
And to clarify, we don't need to include that as a rezoning condition because it will be a condition of the sale from the neighbor of that
Right.
parcel to you.
We're not asking for any change to the UDO for the protective yard. This will be an additional thing that will be kind of a private agreement between the parties.
Thank you. With respect to the speed bumps that you mentioned that you would be willing to put in, is that something that staff has reviewed about the ability to install those? And is that something that you would consider, if I missed it, I apologize, is that something you'd consider including in the rezoning conditions?
Yeah, we'd be happy to include that. That was the suggestion of staff in terms
Okay.
of how he would recommend resolving the issue. And
Okay.
so we'd be happy to have the speed bumps in there.
And I'm guessing that would not be considered a technical correction? That's not something that we had before this case goes to council?
They can't modify it in front of you again. They could certainly modify it before the public hearing. I'd like to hear from transportation about, I don't think they can offer speed bumps on Sherborne. That's not their property.
It would be speed bumps in the parking lot and driveway so that no one's cutting through from Sherborne to Harris Teeter.
They can do that on their property, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Commissioner
I just wanted to clarify that. That's speed bumps within the subject property, not on a right-of-way.
Correct.
Now I understand.
Okay, so personally, that's a design decision I would leave up to site plan.
Okay.
When they have a little bit more understanding. I wanted to ask too, can you remind me approximately how many square footage total you anticipate?
We're looking at approximately 9,000 per building and 3 buildings kind of in a row, kind of all looking the same. But we want to build them in phases, and so we'll build the first one, and then once that one's kind of developed and we're moved in and have it rented up, then we would do the next. There are houses on the other 2 that we'd keep in place and rent out until such time that we're ready to move on. to
So
phase 2.
less than 30,000 square feet?
Oh, yeah, definitely. No. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I think the footprint at the most, as it stands right now, is about 9,000 per building, so 27,000 square feet.
Okay.
But because it's a narrow buildable lot with the easement there, with the other things, we're looking at trying to get as much, rentable square feet as we can in there, but 9,000 is probably the max per building.
And anticipating a two-story structure?
At this time, yes.
Okay.
So if the width got such that we needed to add a third story to get, right, for it to make economic sense, but we would prefer not to do that. So if the buildings end up being less than 4,000 square feet because we're constrained by width, because we got to have a buffer on the front, buffer on the back, all the different things, parking and driveway, we may have to go up to 3,000 square feet on one building, or 3 stories on one building.
And you used the word slope easement. Do you know if it is in fact a slope easement or if it just is a sloped area on the property?
On the survey, it says slope easement. I've been
Okay.
trying to get more information about it, but I haven't been able
Okay,
to get
so
more specifics.
that was probably a slope easement created at the time that Creedmoor was expanded. Okay.
That's my understanding.
That's helpful. Okay. I was asking just because it's a very modest increase in entitlement when we look at it in that context. So personally, I'm ready to support this one just based on having a full understanding of what the intention is.
Thank you. And also, we had heard the concern about height, and just to clarify from staff, under the existing entitlement, how many stories could be built under the existing entitlement?
3 stories.
So it's remaining at 3 stories. Thank you. Commissioner Haver?
I guess just procedural, I want to make sure, check with Mr. York. I guess it was presented that parcel wasn't on the application for the neighborhood meeting, so is there any issue with that procedurally?
That's right. They added a parcel after they appeared before you last time, and applicants are able to add parcels during the process without holding additional neighborhood meetings.
We've discussed that topic in the past about the lack of any specific limitations after the neighborhood meetings have been completed about how a case might be amended after the meetings have occurred. And does staff have an opinion about this case or about materiality and how it changes any of these rezoning cases? It seems to me fairly straightforward in terms of, again, the minimal increase in entitlement, but it's just sort of an ongoing policy question that we've been talking about.
Well, there are limits to which you can add property to your rezoning during the process, because the UDO requires a larger notification buffer than statute. And so as long as everyone who is entitled to notification under both UDO and general statute are notified of public hearings, then adding the parcel is okay.
And that review was, and it looks like staff might have an answer for us, about whether those notice requirements were met with respect to this additional parcel.
I mean, the neighborhood was not notified about the 5,300. That's just kind of slid in there. So, I mean, I can't imagine you can approve that. Excuse me.
Yes.
So when the third parcel was added, it added about 7 additional parcels that needed to have mailing notices, and we received additional letters and envelopes from the applicant, and we mailed those out. So those were notified, the additional parcels.
Great. Thank you very much.
I should have got one of those letters. I didn't get a letter.
Thank you.
Shouldn't there have been a meeting also about that specific property twice? Because it was that meeting twice about these other 2 pieces of property.
Would staff
It looks like it's getting swept underneath the rug, kind of.
I understand that concern. Would staff like to address whether a second meeting, a round of meetings was required for this as opposed to just notice?
As I said before, no additional neighborhood meeting was required.
Thank you. Any other comments and questions from staff? I'm sorry, from the commissioners?
Yeah, I'm still just a little bit confused on this. On the map, on urban form map, an old business here. It just shows an outline for 5306. I think developer was saying 5300. Was it 5300 or 5310 that has not been acquired yet?
5,300.
5300, and that is property to the south.
It's a corner lot.
300?
Yeah,
Oh, correct. And so we can ask questions of the applicant with respect to the application specifically. I mean, I guess we could clarify that specific fact, but I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
we're holding discussion at the table.
yeah. I guess I'm not sure who my question is directed at. Maybe I'm just asking
Sure.
the commission. Yeah, like, is the idea with this project that the entrance and exit is definitely going to be off Sherbourne, if I'm pronouncing it right, Sherbourne, through Creedmoor Road that way? And it just seems like there's a whole lot up the question on this, of what this looks like. I don't know. I have more questions about
I
it.
think that the applicant may have addressed their intentions around the ingress and egress from a street standpoint. Is there anything additional that the applicant would like to add on that matter? Thank you.
So we've been asking questions of our landscape architect, and there's some question about, because there is a bus lane there in front of 5300, some setback requirements, et cetera. So I don't know. That really is, to Commissioner Fox's point, I think a question more for the site design discussion. We're not far enough in the process now. We, at the time of the last meeting when we asked to push this forward, we were still in discussions with the owner of 5300 and didn't even know for sure we were going to be able to secure that property. And so we've now reached an agreement to purchase it. So it wasn't nefarious. It was kind of like this, that opportunity came up, and we wanted to add it to this. It made sense to add it to this zoning application. But we still have a lot of design work to do. And so, as I understand it, there's still a lot of process involved to get approval for the design. This is purely zoning.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Can I be clear?
We have already had 2 rounds of discussions from the public, so thank you. We need to move on to the other cases on the docket as well. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll make a motion. Based on discussion, for case Z423, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated August 8th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Rains has offered a motion, and Commissioner Fox has offered a second. Any further discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor by show of hands? 5. Those opposed? Okay, that motion passes 6-1. Moving on to the third item under old business, case Z1722 on the west side of Jones Franklin Road. This case is to change approximately 2.05 acres from office mixed use 3 stories conditional use to office mixed use 4 stories conditional use. This case first appeared on our May 23rd agenda, and at that time the case was deferred because it required a second meeting in order to satisfy UDO requirements. That meeting was held on June 23rd, so the applicant has now satisfied all UDO rezoning application requirements and is ready for Planning Commission review and recommendation. Given that this is effectively our first time hearing this case, we will receive full presentations from staff, the applicant, and we will hear from the public. So with that, I'll turn to our first staff presentation from Hannah Reckow. Alicia, excuse me.
Fine. Good morning, Alicia Thomas, Planning and Development. I do apologize, I can't get this into presentation mode. But the request before you is Z1723, which is for 1504 Jones Franklin. And again, this request is coming back. It was not previously discussed at the last meeting, but it is in regards to 2.05 acres going from OX3CU to OX4CU. And your deadline for action is October 7th. Perfect, thank you. All right. The zoning in the area is predominantly office mixed use and residential. The site here, as you can see along the screen, this area here is located along Jones Franklin Road at the intersection of 440. 440 and 40 are nearby, surrounding office/research and development, and a mix of a few other uses, including medium scale and moderate scale residential. Here is a closer view of the site. The site has frontage along 3 streets, including Centerview Drive, Woodsdale Drive, and again, Jones Franklin Road. And here are street views of all 3 sites. As you can see, the site here is currently vacant and wooded. The request currently includes one proposed condition that would prohibit various uses, including cemeteries, telecommunication towers over 250 feet, outdoor sport and entertainment facilities, commercial parking lots, remote parking lots, heliport, detention center, jails, prisons, and plant nurseries. Here is a table that shows the change in entitlement. It would increase the maximum number of units from 110 to 129 units, a slight increase in office square footage by roughly 5,000 square feet, and then the retail square footage would remain the same. This request has some changes or additions and minuses when it comes to energy and transportation analysis. It is a lower walk score than average. There is a slight higher transit score than the city average as well. It has a lower bike score and transportation cost index than the city average, and there is a higher job proximity score than average. The site does have 2 transit stops nearby, including a Go Triangle route that is 0.1 miles away, as well as a Go Carry route, which is 0.3 miles away. When it comes to affordability, this request would add to the housing supply. It would increase the number of smaller units. It would permit a variety of housing types and allow smaller lots in the city average, and it is within walking distance of a transit stop. However, it would not include subsidized units. The request includes a lower demographic index percentage than the city average, as well as lower people of color percentage than the city average, and a higher median gross rent than city average. The request is inconsistent with the future land use of designation of office research and development. And there is no urban form guidance, as there is no designation. The request, again, is consistent with the comprehensive plan, but inconsistent with the future land use map. And here are a list of the policies that the request is consistent with, and 2 policies that were identified that the request was inconsistent with, including future land use map and conditional use district consistency. And lastly, your deadline for action is October 7th, and there are no outstanding issues.
Thank you. Moving on then to comments from the public. We will start off with 10 minutes for the applicant and those in favor.
Hello, Brendy Vega, Withers Ravenel, 127 South Wilmington Avenue. This property, as Alicia mentioned, we are proposing some prohibited uses. I also wanted to show a more recent aerial that has multifamily at the corner of Jones Franklin and Capitol Center, and a view of that multifamily, just to show that it's not a vacant site anymore. And the other thing I did want to point out is that Jones Franklin Road is planned to be a 6-lane median divided avenue in the future. And this 2-acre parcel has a lot of frontage on Jones Franklin and will be required to dedicate that frontage. They also have frontage on Centerview and on Woodsdale. So there is a lot of road improvements potentially with this site because it does not fall under the 2 acres, it's just above. The request is coming before you because the applicant did not use the site as intended for the construction of an office building and would like to dispose of it without the conditions that were originally placed on it in 2006. So there is no proposed use. It's just cleaning up some old conditions in order to make it more marketable. Thank you. I'm going to keep it short.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public here to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'd like to open up public comment for those in opposition. Those opposed to this case have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Seeing none, we can bring the discussion back to the table. Any questions or comments from my fellow commissioners?
Thank you. Yeah, the primary inconsistency I was seeing was related to the office research and development future land use category. One, I wanted a little bit more context related to proposed uses there, but before you even do that, it is currently zoned to OX and it's retaining the OX, so it really is likely a moot point. But I do know that there was at some point some review that was going to take place in the comp plan related to that particular category. I didn't know if you could provide a little information about that.
Yes, so currently in the comp plan, the appropriate zoning designation would be office park. However, if OX was to be, if the zoning designation was to be changed to OX, or in this case, remain the same as OX, it would be recommended that a condition be added that restricts housing in that area. And so for that reason, that was the reason why it was considered inconsistent. There was no condition proposing any restriction on residential development.
You are correct that we have previously, as a community, staff, council, citizens have recognized that the office park future land use map designation is a little bit out of step with where we are headed as a community in terms of attitudes about mixed use. And that we flagged that in a progress report a couple of years ago as a point for study. That's still on the list of things to do. We have not resolved that, but I would say recognized as maybe a little bit old-fashioned in terms of thinking about how we manage land use and the interaction between uses.
Thank you for entertaining me. But I'm just going to say I have no opposition to this case.
Thank you, Commissioner Haber.
I had a similar question, that it's OX to OX, understanding that they prefer restricting housing development, but we're adding 19 units. What would they restrict that to? Under current zoning, it's 110. So to make it consistent, you have in the staff report that limiting or restricting housing units would bring it more into consistency, but it's adding 19 units. So I'm just curious, does that go, do you cut that in half? Do you cut it by a third? Like, what would make it more consistent to get it in full consistency?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would agree, based upon the comprehensive plan, just I would say I see the benefit of adding the additional units. I think that's something that is of an advantage here. But as it is currently in the comp plan, I would imagine there would, to make it consistent, there would be no residential units allowed. Additional, that's correct.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I will make a motion, recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated August 8th, 2023, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement for zoning case Z 1723.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think I saw Commissioner Fox's hand first. Excuse me. So Commissioner O'Haver has offered a motion and Commissioner Fox has seconded. Any further debate or discussion on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? Commissioner Peeler, was that a vote for?
I was for.
Okay, yes. That motion passes 7-0. Excellent. Thank you. Moving on to new business, there are 2 items on the new business agenda today. These requests have not appeared on the previous Planning Commission agenda. We will hear a full staff presentation and applicant presentation and hear from the public as well. Item F1 is the Comprehensive Plan Amendment 323 at Kellum Wyatt Farm Park. This is a request to amend map T1 on the street plan and map LU2, the future land use map. The deadline for action is October 7th. I will turn to Bronwyn Redis, or is it Redis? Excuse me. Bronwyn Redis, for a presentation from the city.
Thank you. Bronwyn Redis, Planning and Development. This comprehensive plan amendment before you now is located at 727 North Rogers Lane, or also known as the Kellum Wyatt Farm Park. The request includes 3 distinct requests within it, 2 to the street plan map and 1 to the future land use map. I'll go into more detail in the following slides. Again, your deadline for action is October 7th. So the site itself is owned by Wake County. It is planned to be developed as a Wake County park. A master plan for that park was adopted by Wake County in December of 2021. It's a 59-acre site. It does have a City of Oaks conservation easement over it, approved in 2013. And that conservation easement does significantly restrict what can be developed on the site. Surrounding the site, there's low-scale residential to the east, the south, and the west. There's commercial directly north along the New Bern Avenue corridor. And then further to the west, there's some heavy industrial zoning. This in particular right here is the City of Raleigh Yard Waste Center. So the first of those 3 changes would be to the future land use map. Today, the future land use designation of the site is low-scale residential or moderate-scale residential with public parks and open space running through in a line through the middle. The request would be to amend the designation to be entirely public parks and open space. This future land use designation applies to permanent open space intended for recreation and conservation uses. The second of the requested changes would be to amend the street plan. Today, there is a proposed 2-lane undivided avenue street bisecting the site. This proposed street eventually connects to the west all the way to New Hope Road. So effectively, the proposed street provides a connection between New Hope Road and North Rogers Lane, providing a east-west connection, kind of paralleling New Bern Avenue and creating more of a grid network. There is an existing street stub to the site where you see that solid purple line. And then the request, of course, would be to just remove the proposed street from the site. The proposed street would continue on to the west, connecting to New Hope Road. And the final requested change included in this amendment is the redesignation of Rogers Lane. So today, Rogers Lane is a 4-lane median divided avenue on the street plan. The request would be to redesignate Rogers Lane from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. So that's 2-lane median divided avenue, and for the full extent of Rogers Lane. So all the way from Newbern Avenue south to its intersection with South New Hope Road. I'll note here that the Triangle Regional Model does not project traffic volumes for this road to exceed 15,000 vehicles per day, coming from our transportation staff, and that is the typical lower limit for 4-lane streets. I just wanted to give you some further context about that change, what it would look like. The 2-lane avenue with the median is on the left of the screen. The 4-lane with the median is on the right. You can see both cross sections include sidewalks on both sides, bike lanes on both sides. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. A number of consistent policies were identified: context-sensitive road design, natural resource protection, open space preservation, scenic vistas and views, protection of natural water features, partnerships and collaboration, placemaking, and traditional and buffer zone districts. The request is inconsistent with a few policies as well: density transitions, eliminating gaps, road connectivity, and connectivity. Most of these policies are getting flagged because of the removal of that proposed 2-lane avenue bisecting the site. There aren't any outstanding issues. Just a reminder, your deadline for action is October 7th. I want to ask if you have any questions for me.
Thank you. We may at the table, but not at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much. Then turning to the applicant and those in favor, you have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And I forgot to say earlier, when you come up to speak, please introduce yourself as well.
I can do that. Good morning. My name is Chris Snow. I am the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space for Wake County. I am part of a team that want to talk to you just a little bit about this project and the background. As was mentioned by Raleigh staff, this will be a part of Wake County's Parks, Recreation, and Open Space system. Our system, much like the city's, wants to bring people to special places and have them recreate and enjoy. Our parks tend to be focused more on the out of doors. We are not facility heavy, but tend to let the land dictate what we offer on a site. We are primarily historical, cultural, environmental, and recreational programming based. We have 11 units right now. We have 1 under construction, 2 in design, Kellum Wyatt being one of those. As city staff mentioned, the location just east of downtown Raleigh, right off of 64, this area, this parcel is a 3-generation family farm. It was donated to Wake County by Bob Kellum and Susan Wyatt back in 2018, and again, the City of Oaks Foundation has a conservation easement. In 2020, we started a master plan process for the park with the goals of honoring the conservation values of the property and its history as a family farm while providing recreational and educational amenities. We had a rather robust set of stakeholders in the process. Along with the public, they gave us a shared vision for what the property could be. The master plan was adopted by the Board of Commissioners, Wake County Board of Commissioners, in 2021, again with the nod to the conservation values of the property and the history of a family farm. We are aiming through the master plan to protect the character of the site. There are ponds out here, there are woodlands, there are open meadows, and what you saw earlier on the city slides is a very urbanized, residential-heavy area. Creating a park amenity here allows people to get out and explore and become involved, while at the same time trying to protect some of these unique natural areas, again, in a quickly urbanizing area. Through strategies like educational efforts towards K-12, passive recreation, community events, open space preservation, we are really looking to create a unique place with opportunities for everyone to come and explore. So with that, I'll ask Mike Allen to come up. He's our engineer.
Good morning. I'm Mike Allen with MV5 Engineers and Consultants. We're the civil engineers on the project. And I just want to talk a few minutes about the east-west connector. This connector will literally bisect the property. They've got an extensive trail system plan, so what we would be doing if the east-west connector remained is introducing more opportunities for conflicts between people using the park, using the trails, trying to cross back and forth. Currently, there is a single lane that crosses a dam going from one side of the property to the other. In order to build that east-west connector, that dam would need to be replaced and widened, which would increase the impacts on both of the ponds and the buffers surrounding it. The property is currently zoned for moderate density, which will allow the 6 to 14 units per acre. So over 59 acres, that's a lot of units that we are eliminating with this park. Therefore, the traffic will be significantly different than what was originally modeled when they did the east-west connector. And also, just to reiterate that the east-west connector will remain from Patriot Drive to New Hope. And finally, the conservation easement, and I'll let Chris talk to that.
Hello, everyone. Chris Haggerty, the City of Oaks Foundation. We're at 2431 Westlake Drive here in Raleigh. Honestly, a lot of what I would say has been said about the project. I will say that when the plan was originally designed, the conservation easement was not in place. And so if you look at the surrounding properties, a connector through that area would make sense if the city was going to develop along that similar plan. But with the creation of the conservation easement, which is recorded and is on file. It's 33 pages, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the easement. The easement prevents subdivision of the property. It prevents further construction on the property, prevents adding more impervious surfaces. So you won't see the kind of development that you have seen in this part of town on that property, especially with Wake County now the owner of the property with the master plan in place for the park. We see a wonderful community amenity here. As you just heard, there are significant engineering and environmental challenges that would exist if you did try to extend a road across the two ponds, and you'd have to remove the dam. You would have a number of adverse environmental impacts all along the ponds, which do feed further down into Crabtree Creek and the Neuse River. So from an environmental view, from a policy and planning point of view, from just the community amenities created here by the county's park, we support the petitioner's plan to remove the connector there. And again, if there's specific questions about the easement, I'm happy to answer them. But I don't want to beat the point down. The easement generally would prevent any sort of residential development in this neighborhood, and that was not in place when the plan was initially adopted. So revision of the plan makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from those in support of this project? Seeing none, we will open up the conversation for those in opposition. You have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Thank you. When you come up to the podium, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Hugh Fuller. I stay on Latitude Way. I am for and against. I am a previous Parks and Rec professional, so I am for Parks and Recs. I know what it does for a community. What I'm against is the street plan. For the amount of traffic that we get on North Rogers Lane now, there's a problem. To go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, that's the issue that we have in our community. Right now, everyone uses it as a pass-through to go from New Bern Avenue to New Hope because of the traffic issues that are on New Bern Avenue. So the issue I have is we already deal with, to come out of our neighborhoods, all the subdivisions that are there, we fight to get across. If you limit the lanes now, it's going to be even worse because traffic's going to back up more. Now, if you go further down towards New Hope Road, you have commercial industrial as a recycling plant there. They have 18-wheelers that come in the morning. Those 18-wheelers are lined up along North Rogers Lane. So if you go down to 1 lane, what's going to cause traffic? It's going to cause more issues. Then you have to deal with, are they going to be designated turning lanes to go into the neighborhoods, or are you going to have to, when I say designated, meaning if you're in the middle to turn going into the left, or it's going to be you have to hold up traffic for someone to make a left-hand turn. Those are questions that I have as well. And then we have, just the, when the park does come along, are we going to be looking at crosswalks? What type of crosswalk system is there going to be? We already have speeding on the street that RPD doesn't handle, but that's a different subject for a different day. So there's a number of issues that we have to deal with for the street plan. And like I said, I'm all for the parks. I love parks. That's my life. I'm certified Parks and Recs professional. But the street plan is what I have the issue with, which shouldn't be tied into the actual plan for the park here. Thank you.
Thank you. And are you referring specifically to the east-west connector?
No, North Rogers Lane going from 4 lanes to 2.
I see. Okay.
Yep.
Could we have somebody, or any other comments from those opposed? Seeing none, I'll bring the discussion back to the table. To kick us off, could we have someone from transportation come to discuss the traffic conditions on North Rogers Lane and their analysis of this request?
Hello again, I'm Monique Guyant with Transportation. To speak on the existing conditions, the traffic volumes along Rogers Lane, they do vary between the typical volumes that we'd like to see for a 2-lane divided section to a 4-lane divided section. Closer to New Bern Avenue, the volumes range from anywhere from like 12,000 vehicles per day down to 8,000. And as we move south to New Hope Road, those volumes increase and they hover about 12. I'm sorry, these are the future volumes. These numbers that I'm stating to you are the future 2050 volumes, but they range from 12,000 to the higher bound of 15,000 vehicles per day. And these volumes come from the 2050 Triangle Regional Model, which takes into account the growth that we can expect in Raleigh, any additional volume that we can base future traffic on. So to speak to the concerns about adjusting the designation, we are in support of the redesignation from 4-lane divided to 2-lane divided, and it's because these volumes are not expected to exceed 15,000, and so that's the lower limit of a 4-lane divided avenue. Additionally, with this designation, having it be a 2-lane divided road does not mean that that's what we can only have 2 lanes on this road. That's the minimum. So we can have left turn lanes, we can have right turn lanes into the neighborhood. And additionally, with this redesignation, we will not be restricting our current existing right-of-way down to a two-lane divided road. The existing right-of-way that is there will be maintained. But when it comes to new development, those the right-of-way that would be needed would be reduced.
Could you clarify that, please? There's a great deal of this road is already 4 lanes, 6 lanes at some of the intersections. So if redevelopment occurred, there's less right-of-way required. Would they then take that right-of-way and the asphalt would shrink?
No, it's not my understanding that the right-of-way would be given back or purchased by the property owners along that corridor. Typically, we like to maintain our existing right-of-way that we have available. Did I answer your question on that? Okay, thank you.
But to follow up on that, because I had a similar question, the existing right-of-way would allow for us to do a 2-lane divided and add the bike lanes and other things as well. That does not occur currently. Would the 4-lane divided require additional right-of-way outside of what is existing?
Can you reword that, please?
Yeah, sorry. The existing right-of-way, I had a similar question as Commissioner Otwell, looking at there are some areas where the right-of-way is extensive, and then in other areas it narrows down. So my question is, if we change my favorite dotted lines in the comp plan to a 2-lane, it seems like it would allow us to maintain the existing right-of-way but add those additional bike lanes without taking additional right-of-way. If we maintain the 4-lane divided, is there enough right-of-way existing to create that 4-lane, or would the city need to acquire additional right-of-way to satisfy the 4-lane divided spatial requirements?
And is this just on the along the entire
north-south?
Rogers
Yeah, I
line?
mean, I'm just looking at the entire way all the way down to past the crossover that the citizen referred to. Right here at I'm trying to look at the road names. There's one area here where it's literally 6 lanes, which I would think we could do a 4-lane divided, but as you travel further north, there's only 2 lanes. And my point being, if we go to 2-lane, we can get the bike lanes in now and maintain that cross section, knowing that the anticipated traffic volumes don't necessarily warrant a 4-lane. If we keep a 4-lane requirement, will the city need to acquire additional right-of-way? Because that takes time, and we run into these issues regularly where certain right-of-ways allow us to put sidewalks, and it's a sidewalk to nowhere. Because it takes time for the city to acquire land. There has to be a process that has to take place. So my question is, if we go to a 2-lane, can we get the bike lane, and do we have the existing right-of-way to accommodate that? Can somebody who's more articulate than me?
I think you mean that if we went to a 4-lane, do they have the space currently to accommodate the bike lanes that are needed?
Yes, that is correct. Given if you're talking about the sections where there are 3 lanes, like you said, or like in some 2 lanes, yes. Given that the right-of-way, the existing right-of-way is wide enough, we'd be able to put those facilities in.
So it's wide enough to do the 4-lane divided with the bike lanes within the existing right-of-way currently?
I don't know specifically what sections. I don't have a map available, but.
Thank you. Other questions, comments from commissioners?
Yeah, so the section between let me rephrase that. You said 4-lane divided is a minimum, correct?
Correct.
Looking at it on Google Street View, it looks like the section from Thunder Ridge down to Anchorage Way, which is the section in front of the park of Rogers Lane. It's not the whole thing being requested to go to 2, but it's the section that borders the park specifically. It looks like that is 2 lanes now. it looks like it is less than a 4-lane minimum. So is that correct? That not that whole stretch shown on the presentation is 4-lane minimum currently?
Currently, the entire Rogers Lane is designated as a 4-lane divided avenue. That's the street plan designation. Currently, what's on the ground may not be that designated.
So they can put what's less than the minimum on, like, in practice, essentially.
I'm going to jump in for a second just to throw a life preserver.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I'm just literally trying to understand.
The comp plan was likely adopted after some of those buildings were built, some of those housing developments. So the designation of a 4-lane is for a future condition of development.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Alwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I have a couple questions for the Wake County staff, please. Will the removal of the cross road from the street plan, will there be access provided to the Kingsborough estate? It looks like a trailer park. Will they have access to the park?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't see that on the map. I'm sorry.
Other questions from the commissioners?
I just have a comment. Chair Miller, I generally support, I'll back up. I support connectivity and the grid that the city comp plan encourages, but in this case, I support the amenity and the benefit that the park would provide by eliminating the east-west cross-access road. I still have concerns with the reduction, I guess, from wherever it may be between New Bern and New Hope, from going down to 2 lanes to accommodate bike paths. I think bike paths are required, but that is the only north-south connector for a while. So I'm just concerned that if we, even with turn lanes and left turn lanes, I'm concerned that that's going to restrict overall future connectivity north and south. So I don't know if this is something that maybe the applicant wants to consider removing or and developing for another time and leave the removal through the site. And that's more of a question for, I guess, staff and the applicant.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to whether they could consider or would consider changing the street plan amendment to only remove the east-west connection?
I think at this time, we're not real sure what we want, because what we're trying to do is create a smaller road section so it's safer for the people on the neighborhood opposite Rogers to get across to the park and make it walkable by creating the 4 lanes with the divided median, just increasing that distance that they have to walk. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, the Wake County would have to dedicate right-of-way to do any type of widening out there. I don't know how that would impact the conservation easement, whether or not that can even occur. But, we had talked about working with Raleigh staff as far as trying to create safe pedestrian access from the neighborhoods across the road, allowing them to have some sort of pedestrian refuge and then come on across. It's easy to do with a 2-lane or a 3-lane road versus a 4 or a 5-lane road. So I think at this point, we would prefer to keep that request in there, but Chris, if you have anything or.
Can I ask a follow-up
Yes,
as
please.
well? I guess it's probably to City of Oaks. Do the retained rights in the CE allow the dedication of right-of-way along Rogers Lane for street improvements?
So, Commissioner Fox, that is a question that it depends on how deeply you want to take it. There is no expressed grant of permission for the owner of the property, in this case the county, to use land for additional right-of-way. However, If the city of Raleigh had required it, if there was a government taking, of course, they could take that, and you would have like a condemnation action or something to use for right-of-way that way. But it's nothing that there is any reservation of right within the easement that would allow for that.
Okay. And the conservation easement itself, the conservation value is stand of virgin growth, some endangered species, or what is it in this particular case?
So conservation values are calculated by environmental professionals who come out and do an inventory of the species and the natural features on the property. So without going through there's like 64 plus species identified, birds, fish, amphibians, et cetera, not even getting into the different plants out there. You also have the two ponds, the turf grass lakes, and their impact on water quality further down. So the environmental consultants come out, they identify everything that has conservation value. In terms of monetization, that is actually determined by appraisers coming out and seeing what the restrictions placed by the easement would do to change the use of the land. So rather than this parcel having a higher tax value, for example, as it would if a residential property as parks and open space, it has a much lower tax value, but the conservation values and what would be required for environmental protection, riparian buffers, any environmental damage, remediation of environmental damage, that would drive those costs up.
Okay. And any effort to change a conservation easement would be a lengthy process, correct?
It is. I mean, it's a contractual process between private entities, and in this case, depending on what is being asked, it's hard to give hypotheticals about how easy or hard something would be. As an example, if there's a situation where something was required for public safety, we as the conservation easement holder would be much more inclined to negotiate and find a way to make it work that would have the least impairment on the conservation values. But if it was just something, say, for aesthetics, we would likely resist that very strongly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Otwell.
I would like to say that I appreciate and support the reduction of this from a 4 to a street lane corridor, and I think that I'm willing to trust transportation staff's assessment that the traffic will not rise to a level that will cause this to be an issue. So I'd be happy to support this with or without removing that from the application.
Thank you. And to clarify from staff, they said that in order to support a 4-lane road, the traffic counts would have to exceed 15,000. And the current counts and projections are less than 15,000. I'm sure it's in the staff report, and I'm just not finding it. Could you clarify what the expected traffic count on this road is or will be? How far below 15,000?
Hello, Monique Guy with Transportation. I brought my laptop up here to specifically talk about the traffic volumes. So those numbers that I mentioned before, the 15,000 vehicles per day, that lower limit for 4-lane divided is the typical vehicle load that we can expect to see on this avenue, or a 4-lane avenue. Based off of the 2050 projected traffic volumes on Rogers Lane, from the numbers from the southern section of Rogers Lane, closer to New Hope Road, I'm seeing maybe 14,200. So none that exceed and tip over that 15,000, but that 15,000 number isn't like a hard line that we do. We sometimes are a little lenient with it, but we're comfortable with that volume being handled by 3 lanes, which a 2-lane undivided avenue, like if or sorry, not two-lane undivided, two-lane divided, which is you could have 2 through lanes and a center turning lane. That would be classified as like 3 lanes, and then that is suitable and appropriate to have 14,000 vehicles traveling on.
Okay. But it sounds like it is sort of right near a threshold, so I understand that the felt conditions might, why they might have some concern here. So I think that that makes sense. Other thoughts from the commissioners on that or any other topic?
I just want to say I'd also, with Commissioner Otwell, also definitely support the condition of making it to 2 divided. Point out again that there is a section of that road that is currently 2 currently. And I think, you know, having a 2-lane divided road there makes it way more suitable to having a park, to making it safe for families to cross, people to bike and walk around there, which should be the point of a project like this anyway. So I think it really, changing the road to that makes it much more, the whole area and the whole idea way better. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. No, Commissioner Fox, excuse me.
I'd like to make a recommendation for approval of CP 323 as it is reasonable and in the public interest, as it provides for natural resource protection, open space preservation, scenic vistas and views, and opportunities for placemaking at the Kellum Wyant Farm Park.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fox has made a motion. Commissioner Peeler has seconded. Any further discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item F2. Rezoning case Z2323 on Buffalo Road. This case is to change approximately 0.74 acres from R6 conditional use to a new R6 conditional use district. I will turn to Hannah Reckow for a staff presentation.
Good morning, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So this is case Z2323. A request to rezone from an existing conditional use R6 district to a new R6 CU district. You can see the area here is predominantly residential nature, largely R6 with some pockets of R4 and R10. Kind of zoom out on where in the city this is. This is northeast, Raleigh, east of the intersection of Buffalo Road and North New Hope Road. A little bit farther west, you'd hit Capitol Boulevard just before it splits with Lewisburg Road. And this area is largely residential. There are some commercial uses off to the west and more farther west to go. To zoom in on the site, it is currently undeveloped and forested. Has a frontage on Buffalo Road. There is a blue line stream along the back of the property. Some views from Buffalo Road, looking east and west. And this is a conditional use case. The existing conditions that this property is a part of a larger district include a number of older zoning conditions that no longer be applicable. There's also a requirement for a 100-foot sort of setback along Buffalo Road and a berm to be built there. So the requested district just has one proposed condition, which would be to prohibit the apartment building type. Some context on this, currently in R6, under the conventional development option, apartment building type is not permitted. It is permitted in R6 under the frequent transit development option, which currently does not apply to this site. But if in the future that part of the UDO map would change, this zoning condition would prohibit apartment building type in that scenario. But otherwise, it is sort of duplicating the current regulations in R6. So the change here really is allowing a little more flexibility, allowing buildings to be constructed closer to Buffalo Road, and that along with that goes a small increase in the number of units you could potentially build on the site. So context of this property, it does have a lower walk, transit, and bike score than average, and a roughly average transportation cost index and proximity to jobs compared to the city overall. There is bus service, I think roughly half a mile to the west along North New Hope Road and part of Buffalo Road, 15L. And this request would add potentially as a small bump in the number of units that could be constructed. There are no zoning conditions requiring those to be subsidized affordable, but in general, it does permit a variety of housing types and a smaller unit size. Sorry, lot size. Looking at demographics and the land use in this area, it is part of a census tract that where residents are significantly more likely to be racial minorities or to be low income compared to the city overall. The median rent in this area has increased, but at a similar rate to the city overall. So the site is designated low-scale residential on the future land use map. The requested district R6 is consistent with that guidance. And there's no urban form guidance on the urban form map for the site. So overall, the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically policies around sort of reinforcing the existing urban pattern. It would still allow some variety in the housing types, and as infill development would permit very similar types of development as the surrounding area. The one inconsistent policy that was flagged is one that is recommending on major streets there not be new single-family lots. The request would continue to allow detached housing fronting on Buffalo Road, so that sort of small inconsistent policy is cited as well. So that is the staff overview. Your deadline for action is in early October, and I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Moving on to comments from the public. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning. My name is Amy Kraut. I'm an attorney at Smith Anderson. I represent the applicant in this case. Really quickly, the reason for this rezoning request is truly just to remove the inapplicable zoning conditions that are from that 1993 Winchester subdivision, which prevent the property from really being developed kind of efficiently in this area. The site location, again, it's about 3/4 of an acre lot. It's been vacant for many years and is surrounded by predominantly residential uses, both single family and townhomes. It is located in the ETJ. This property and the property directly east, it looks like it was originally contemplated to be in that Winchester subdivision and never ended up there. So it's kind of in the city's ETJ as a little island of itself. So it would have to be annexed to get city sewer and water. For here, again, if you look at the Winchester subdivision, those zoning conditions were adopted in 1993. They include that 100-foot buffer along with stormwater restrictions, development restrictions, and this property never fully got integrated into that subdivision. And so it's just kind of been hanging out since 1993 with those zoning conditions on it, and it's not been able to be developed. One of the unique features about this site is that stream in the background. It's also a greenway corridor, so a 75-foot dedication would be required along that stream. So you're taking about 75 feet off the back end of the property, and because those kind of Winchester subdivision landscape buffers apply at the front, you're taking 100 feet off, really leaving this property not suitable for any meaningful development. In terms of the proposed zoning, we're retaining the R6 zoning. We're really just here to remove those subdivisions, and we prohibited apartment buildings just to ease some neighbors' minds that that wouldn't be what we're pursuing now or in the future if it ever was allowed as a frequent transit option. Other than that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments from those in support of this project? Seeing none, I will open up the discussion. For anyone in opposition, you have a total of 10 minutes to speak. No. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the table then. Any questions or comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, it's not very great seeing a development that will have to put a small little driveway right here on Buffalo Road, but they can do that by right now anyway with a single family house. So,
Okay. Good point. Other comments?
Chair Miller, just a quick, small comment. So currently, even with the conditions, you can still build a single-family home there. Is that correct with this proposal?
Yes, that is permitted. There's, as the applicant mentioned, there's a 75-foot easement on the back of the property and a 100-foot buffer that I believe includes building a berm along Buffalo Road. So, but if it's possible to do those two things, then yes, I believe a detached house would be.
I guess my only comment for the applicant would be to maybe add a condition prohibiting a single-family home because of the Buffalo Road frontage. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that something that the applicant has or would consider?
I can speak to my client about that. I think currently we're really just trying to get this rezoned to evaluate the options of what's even possible on the site. So they don't have any current set plans on what exactly they want to do with it. Are you just talking about just building one single family residence on the site? I can have him answer that question for you.
Hi, my name is Paresh Changel. We don't own the land at this point. We're just under contract. And what we're trying to do is get that 100-foot setback to reduce that number, basically. As to once that is done, we'll be able to figure out what we can do. But at this point, building a single family over there, I don't know if that will make economical sense for us to build on there. We're thinking possibly try and do some townhomes. I don't know how many we can do. But obviously, the R6 zoning, whatever it allows, that's what we'll try and abide by. And obviously, you have to look at impervious surface and parking and everything else. So we'll take all that into consideration. The first thing, before we can go down that route, we need to see if we can get the 100-foot buffer taken away or reduced anyway. So we have a plot that we can start working with.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that you're going to leave the conditions as is and not add a no single-family home condition?
Right now, the plan is not to build a single-family home. Okay, but based on the size of the parcel, you're losing 75 from the back. You lose another 100 from the front. It doesn't give you much of an envelope to work with. So if we can try and get some of that 100-foot, which was there with the pre-existing subdivision, removed or even reduced, then we can actually see what's possible and then go from there.
Okay.
Additional comments or thoughts? No other comments or questions from the commissioners?
I was just going to say the lot depth, it's only about 225 feet. So once you take those two pieces out, you have like a 50-foot buildable area. So as zoned currently, this land is basically going to stay like it is. So I think the question is, do you want the land to be in active use for the city in the mode he's proposing?
Okay.
Or try and create some sort of housing. We're struggling for housing in this county, we know that. And whatever we can try and build, it would be helpful.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'd like to move to recommend approval of zoning case number Z-23-23. I think this is in the public interest. It brings formerly vacant land into productive use and allows for more types of homes to be built in choice.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Mann has seconded. Any other further debate on the merits of this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Moving on to approval of the minutes. We have 4 sets of minutes from past committee of the whole meetings and planning commission meetings. Does anyone have any comment or proposed changes to any of the minutes? Seeing none, I will make a motion to approve all 4 sets of minutes contained on today's agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Otwell is seconded. All those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Moving on to other business, starting off with the report of the chair. In the agenda, under report of the chair, you will see the new committee assignments for this fiscal year. These committees and their assignments will run from now until the end of the fiscal year on June 30th of next year. If you have any questions or need any changes throughout the year, feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss that. And I will return it over to reports of the members and the assistant director. I know that we're going to be talking about committee schedules and also schedules for the retreat as well. But I will let members and staff discuss those items. So moving on to report of the members. Commissioner Raines.
I don't have anything additional to report other than the August 29th committee of the whole meeting. I'll see you then.
And just to clarify, since that case Z60 was withdrawn, will we still have a regular meeting for the committee of the whole?
I'm not trying to be dramatic with this squeaky mic. I apologize. We would like to hold that date in the event that you have something on your next agenda that you need to refer there.
Okay.
I'm not anticipating anything on that August 24, but we'd like to wait to cancel. We'd like you to hold that date until your next meeting, please.
What if the air conditioning still isn't working by then? Who knows? Moving along the table, Commissioner Otwell.
I have just a quick question and comment. Commissioner Peeler and I were trying to dig into some of the implications of the missing middle text changes, and we found the wonderful planning site online that tracks missing middle projects, and we're wondering if y'all could confirm if it's up to date, and if not, when it might be up to date, how that works. Are you familiar with the page?
I'd have to look at it to know if it is up to date. Do you want to send me an email?
I'll send you a link. The page currently reports that there's no implemented missing middle projects, and we think we've identified at least a couple, so we'd like to check. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mann? Thank you. And Commissioner O'Haver?
No report.
Commissioner Fox?
No report.
And Commissioner Peeler?
No report.
All right. Do we have anything on the agenda for infrastructure or strategic planning this month?
Infrastructure and mobility I believe we'll be discussing again green stormwater infrastructure with the Partners for Environmental Justice. That conversation started in May. The committee did not meet in June for lack of a quorum. And so I think we're going to pick that conversation back up later this month is my expectation. I'm not expecting strategic planning to meet. The chair may tell me differently. I will follow his lead. So that's those two. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and text change. Any comments on the text change committee?
I just lost my laptop, but I believe our next meeting is on Wednesday, August 16th.
That's right.
Yes, next week.
And I know we'll be discussing changes to the TOD that will impact the New Bern Avenue cases as well. Do you know what room, does it say already, what room we're meeting in? Excuse me.
I think it's where you usually meet in OEP, right?
In OEP 809, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll have sufficient space to house interested, okay, great. Okay. Then moving on to the report of the Assistant Director.
The only thing I wanted to touch on with you all today was the possibility of scheduling a fall retreat. This is something we have done annually for some time now. I've proposed some dates as options. I need to take, I believe, October 18th off that list. That's right. Was the chair's not available then? But we got a little out of step on our publication there, sorry. But so we are looking at some options, September 8th, Friday, Wednesday, September 20, or Tuesday, October 31. Costumes will be required if you select that date. So start planning now. I mean, if you want to have a Halloween retreat.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available on the 18th.
But would like some indication from you all if you have a preference for one of those dates. It'd be great if you all looked at your calendars right now and told us and we knew if we had a quorum. I would love that. But I also appreciate that sometimes that is not the way the world works.
Can you repeat the dates real quick?
Sure, they're published in the agenda as well. Friday, September 8, Wednesday, September 20, or Tuesday, October 31. Historically, the commission has held retreat at the Wetlands Center on Peterson Street, and usually in the morning with a light breakfast and some time for you all to visit with each other, and then the business of the retreat. Staff is happy to support that model and also open to other options if something else works better for the commission.
Thank you. And for scheduling purposes, it's usually 9 to noon. Is that correct? By show of hands, if folks can look at September 8th, does anyone know if they are not available on that date?
Which date?
September 8th? Okay.
You said not, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Not available on September 8th and from 9 to noon. What about September 20th? Not available. We have 2 unavailable. Okay. Just taking some notes.
Everyone wants a costume.
Yes. And October 31st, anyone unavailable?
I could do morning.
It would only be morning. Oh, boy.
My trick-or-treating starts in the morning, so
Yours says
I'm
yeah.
not sure. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, well, it looks like September 20th is a maybe, but October 31st, it looks like, at this moment anyway, we might have a quorum. I know that that's a bit further out, so that things may change. So do you want to go ahead and set it now, or do you want to wait? You'd like to set it now for October 31st?
Said 9 to noon.
9 to noon. Happy Halloween, everyone. The summer has officially ended. Party's over. Any other comments or in the report of the Assistant Director?
I mentioned this to Chair Raines earlier. Staff will be working with him to prepare for the special cow on the 29th of August, where we will discuss the New Bern Avenue rezoning and station area planning. So looking forward to that.
Thank you.
No other business
Anything
from
about your
me.
position in particular? Nope. Okay. All right, then with that, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.